Welcome, everybody, to Socratica Reads. My name is Kimberly Hatch Harrison, and I'm the co-founder of Socratica. We reach a fairly specific audience with our YouTube channel, which focuses on advanced math, science, and computer programming. Our audience is spread all over the world, and while we may not all be studying the same things or in the same professions, the one thing we all share is a love of learning. In case you don't know, I wrote a book called How to Be a Great Student, which is the true story of how I figured out the academic life, making lots of mistakes along the way. I was always very bright, but not always very disciplined as a student, because I didn't have to be. For the longest time, I could just coast through. But we all reach a point where we find our limit and have to actually do the work. In my book, I explain the various techniques I learned that mean success in academia. I'll include a link in the show notes in case you'd like to get your own copy. It's autumn here in the Northern Hemisphere. Everybody has gone back to school, and it's also the start of spooky season. Today is Halloween. Tomorrow is the start of 𝙎𝙤𝙤𝙦𝙤𝙧𝙩. All that adds up to a theme I'd like to introduce into the Socratica Reads podcast, dark academia. We've mainly been reading science fiction together, and by now that may seem like the theme of the podcast as a whole, but it's actually the books that influence us, that inspire us in our work. Science fiction is a very helpful thing to read because it keeps you looking ahead, wondering about what will happen. What are the consequences of your scientific investigations or your cutting-edge engineering project? Dark academia is another theme that has particular appeal for our people, friends of Socratica, or as we call them, Socratica friends. We are a community of people who love learning. We love the autumn because it means back to school. We love sharpened pencils and fountain pens and Japanese ballpoint pens and notebooks and journals and typewriters and a laptop that fits perfectly into your backpack. We love the old card catalog and carols in the library. We love our Kindle, and as soon as we finish one ebook, we load up another one. We have a signature style, prep school uniforms. We love Harry Potter robes. We own Harry Potter robes. We love Oxford and Cambridge and the other Cambridge and the Ivy League and little liberal arts colleges that no one has heard of. We love Caltech and MIT and Harvey Mudd. If all this made sense to you, you'll understand why I'm adding dark academia to the reading list for our podcast about the love of books and the power of literacy. And speaking of the vital importance of literacy, I'm going to pause here to say there will be no further pauses because our podcast is sponsored by the Socratica Foundation Literacy Campaign. The Socratica Foundation is an educational nonprofit dedicated to the three timeless pillars of learning and knowledge: literacy, numeracy, also known as math literacy, and critical thinking. The Socratica Foundation Literacy Campaign includes such projects as a course on phonics, reading lessons, book donations, and sponsoring this podcast, which celebrates reading. You can learn more about the foundation at socratica.org. One of the themes of dark academia is that you have locked inside some secret knowledge or wisdom or power that is hidden, maybe even from yourself. But by leaving society at large and joining a smaller group of knowledge seekers, this special talent of yours can emerge. This often means going away to a remote college or joining a secret society. In our book for today, Down a Dark Hall by Lois Duncan, it's a newly opened boarding school out in the boonies in upstate New York. There are only 4 students at Blackwood Academy for Girls. Yeah, it's very exclusive. To get in, you had to take some tests, unusual psychological tests. Our main character, Kit, isn't nearly as smart as her best friend from back home, and yet Kit got in and her friend didn't. One of the girls, Linda, is sweet but decidedly no genius like her friend Ruth. Kit, who lost her father, and was shipped off to boarding school when her mother remarries, bonds with Sandy, who also lost her parents. The question is, what else do these 4 girls have in common? Why were they picked to be the first students at Blackwood? The school promises individual instruction, helping the students reach their potential. Kit starts taking piano lessons, and while she's never been musical, she starts having dreams about playing beautiful music. She wakes up and her fingers ache as if she has actually been playing all night. Ruth is able to advance rapidly through math. Linda discovers she has a talent for drawing and painting, and Sandy is writing sonnets. This is some great school. What's the secret? The dark academia secret. It's too good to be true, right? I'm going to read you a little excerpt from a part where Kit starts to think this place maybe isn't what it appears to be. Are you ready? Let's begin. At first, the thought occurred to her that she might be dreaming again. Of course, she knew she wasn't. It was mid-afternoon, and she was on her way to her literature class with Madame 𝙎𝙬, and yet the music. It was coming from behind the closed door of the music room. Strange and beautiful and achingly familiar, the melody swept over her, drawing from her a response she had never experienced from any music before. She placed her hand on the knob and opened the door. Jules was seated with his back toward her, and the music was coming from the stereo speakers on the recording equipment. "What are you playing?" Kit asked him. When he did not respond, she realized that he was concentrating too hard on the music to have heard her. She raised her voice. "Jules, what is that music?" With a quick, startled gesture, Jules flicked a switch and the sound abruptly ceased. His expression when he turned was one of unreasonable anger. "What do you mean, interrupting?" he began. And then, at the sight of Kit's surprised face, he seemed to catch himself. His voice softened. "Oh, it's you." "You didn't have to turn it off," Kit said. "I heard the music through the door. It's beautiful. I had to know what it is." "I don't think it has a name," Jules told her. "But it must. Everything that's published has a name." "Well, sure. What I meant was, I don't know what it is." "Doesn't it say on the CD?" "It's not a commercial recording," Jules said. "It's just a collection of odds and ends I've taken from one source or another because I liked them." "I like them too," Kit said. "Especially that last piece. Could you play it again?" "You heard most of it." Jules made no gesture to switch the sound back on. Kit regarded him with bewilderment. Never had she seen Jules 𝙎𝙬 with anything but complete control of himself. Now he looked off balance, as though he didn't know how to handle the situation. His eyes shifted from hers in a way that made him look almost guilty. Guilty about what? Kit could not imagine. She knew that she should get to class. She was already late, and Madame could not stand tardiness. Still, she stood there, anchored in the doorway, watching the play of expressions across Jules's handsome face. "You do know that song," she said with certainty. "You're a music graduate. If you don't recall the title, you must at least know who wrote it. Who was the composer?" "I'm not sure," Jules said. "It sounds like... well, I guess it's something by Schubert." "By Schubert? And you don't recognize it?" Kit was incredulous. "How can you possibly not know the work of someone so famous?" "You don't recognize it," Jules said defensively. "No, but I don't claim to be a student of music. Even so, I know that Schubert died when he was very young. He couldn't have written all that much." "Look, Kit." Jules did meet her gaze now. His eyes were blazing, and the anger which he had shown when he had first turned and seen her lay somewhere in their depths. "I don't know what's gotten into you all of a sudden, but I don't need this kind of interrogation. You don't know a thing about music. You can't have heard this piece before. It's practically unknown." "But I have heard it," Kit said quietly. She had not only heard it, but she knew where. The melody on the tape was the same haunting song that she had been playing in her dream. You can stop listening now if you don't want any more spoilers, but yes, that was Schubert, a new composition by Schubert. The girls are getting individual instruction all right, by some very talented teachers. This story plays around with the concepts of what it is to be a student or a disciple. How much of yourself do you have to give up or give over to someone else so you can develop into your more advanced self? It's also a kind of inversion of the idea of the muses, who are usually depicted as young women. There's also this wonderful idea. Have you heard this before? That when you read, it's the closest you can get to actually being in someone's head, sharing their thoughts. This is true even when they're long gone. I can have a conversation, okay, fairly one-sided, with my favorite witty writer, Jane Austen, anytime I like. Maybe you need some life advice, so you turn to the Stoics, or Irma Bombeck. This story, Down a Dark Hall, is kind of a Gothic metaphor for that experience. We do help Schubert live whenever we play his music. He lives on in our brains. Jane Austen lives on in my head and my heart. We'd love to chat more with you about reading. Do you find yourself drawn to this genre, dark academia? Our Discord server is open to all of our YouTube channel members and our patrons from Patreon. You can join at patreon.com/Socratica. Thanks for listening.